everybody, what's going on? Got another rapid review for today. It's going to be Immortal Era by Finish Line Comics. This was a Kickstarter comic that I backed, got all 3 issues, so it's going to be kind of an overview of all 3, but not totally in depth on all 3. I'm going to pull from all 3 comics, so hopefully it'll be pretty easy to follow. But anyway, like I said, this is done by Finish Line Comics. Written by Edward Davis, art by Cesar Oliveira, colors by Viviani Spinelli, and it's lettered by Manny Hernandez. This was a really good story. Can't wait for the 4th one. Usually I don't get more than one, but for this particular one, you got 3 issues for $20, and I kind of couldn't pass that up. So this one begins with a news report on January 2nd of 2000. And they're talking about how the last recorded death was before midnight on New Year's Eve, and it was a lady named Susan Rockford who died of a brain tumor, like right before midnight. But since then, in 2 days, in the entire world, there has not been one reported death. They send it to a news anchor in a hospital talking to a doctor, and the doctor's just like, this is just a weird coincidence. Well, another news anchor who had been fired from the station busts in during the interview with his own cameraman and basically says, this is all BS, you're being lied to, follow me. And before anybody can stop him, he goes to this one part of the hospital, kicks in the door, cameraman goes in, and you see all these people that are super messed up. Missing limbs, bullet holes in the head. Just all these people should be dead, but they're all still alive. And after he shows that, it gets kind of blurry because it's shown from a television set, and they cut off the feed, and the reporter in the news station is like, you know, this is just a prank. It was a disgruntled employee. Well, we fast forward to 2200 CE. It's 200 years after Death Era is what they're calling it, ADE, AID. And you're in an underground village called Hope Village. It's run by one of the main characters only known as Father. During all this time, you know, the way that I gather it, because it doesn't go way too much into it, but you know, you have an overpopulation of the world. So certain things get set into place, like there's a lottery to have children. And the people above, they're all chipped to gain access to places. And I guess also during this time, since there is so many people, you know, the resources like food and things like that become so much that some people actually turn into cannibals, and they're called eaters. Now, Father was a loner, and he came across a baby because, like I said, there's a lottery to have children, and some people, I guess, even if they won the lottery, they decided that this world just wasn't good enough for the kids, and they would leave them underground to be eaten by these cannibals. Well, Father saves this baby named Miguel and decides to raise him as his own. Well, it kind of feels like he finds this as his calling to protect these children, protect people, so he starts saving all these children. He kind of adopts these 3 to raise his siblings, and Miguel is the oldest. He's you know, he was born on the surface in the lottery. He was chipped, so he can gain access to stuff on the surface. So he is just like this badass warrior that they send out to forge the surface, since he can get into places. Then you have, I guess she's the middle child. Her name is Kimberly. She's kind of snooty. She makes the clothes and cuts the hair of the people in Hope Village. And then you have the youngest name, I think it's Aroni, but they call her Ari for short. And she does the patrols at night, watches the wall. So, if the eaters get in, she could be the one that chases them off. You start out with, Ari is with this doctor named Dr. Mann, and I'll talk more about him in a few minutes. Basically, he's there to teach the children history of the surface, and he sends Miguel out to try to find a cure for nobody dying, because, like I said, the world's getting overpopulated. So he always sends Miguel out to get supplies and chips. I don't really get what they do with the chips. He just sends them out there for them. Ari's talking to Father about how, she's worried about Miguel, and Father's like, Miguel can take care of himself. We all miss him, but he can take care of himself. So you cut to Miguel's mission on the surface. He's getting into a hospital. He's going to steal these chips for Dr. Mann. And he's on top of an elevator, and he gets up to a certain part of the building, and he sees this doctor. She's sitting in her chair, and she just put something in a safe. So he breaks into the office, and she's you could tell she's a really just bad person. She speaks down to him, calls him a worm. She just doesn't seem like she's very good at all. And you'll find out later she really, really isn't. But, he asked her, basically, I was just going to take the chips, but I want what's in that safe, so could you unlock it? She goes, no. She pulls a gun on him, says, this is going to be the last time your little pea brain's going to have any cognitive function. He goes, well, I didn't want to do this, and he cuts her arm off. He takes the arm, unlocks the safe, and he finds a book. He takes the book. Well, she tells him, I can't wait. I'm going to have you hanging from a spike, starving for eternity or something like that. And he's like, okay, I really didn't want to do this, and he knocks her out. Well, he escapes, and while he's escaping, it's nighttime down in the village, and Ari is doing her patrol. And one of the eaters comes in, and she shoots him, and, it's really weird, because at first he's talking, like, very creepy, just in a creepy way, but as soon as he gets shot, it's like something snaps in him, and he kind of speaks like a normal person. But she basically chases him off. Well, Miguel comes back, and he says, I have this book, and I think it's the key to what we've been looking for. Well, Ari is very skeptical, because in the next book it cuts to so many scenes of Miguel saying, I found what's going to fix this. I found what's going to fix it. It's something different every time. Well, Dr. Mann starts to read the book. And what the book is Susan Rockford's son, Rob, was by her side. And he was just going out of his mind. There's nothing he can do to save his mother. She's got a brain tumor. The doctors don't think she's going to make it through the night. And he basically says, wouldn't you do anything for your parents? And I said this before when I gave my brief synopsis of this. I completely agree with that. There's almost nothing I wouldn't do if it meant saving my parents. But he goes for a walk. And somehow he gets to the side of town and sees a psychic. And he walks in, and of course, he happens to find the only real psychic in the world. And she tells him that there's this phrase or spell you can say while cutting yourself with this special knife, and it would pull death into the world, because death is kind of invisible, So at first he doesn't believe it, but he's like, I'm willing to try anything at this point. So he goes back to see his mother, and he says the magic phrase, cuts his hand, and Death appears. And Death is just a normal-looking guy in a black and red suit. And Death is trying to tell him, hey, just let your mother go. It's going to be peaceful. She's not going to feel pain anymore. And he just can't do it. And the witch had told him, you can kill Death with this knife. So he turns into, well, if this form doesn't scare you, he turns into the robed, scythe-carrying version of Death. And Rob's like, and I remember the witch telling me that he's going to try to use a form to scare me, but that's not really him. So Rob slashes out, and he turns back into just the kind of human form. And while he's doing this, the doctors rush into the room. You find out the doctors can't see Rob or this guy. Death, I'm sorry. They can't see him or Death. So while his mother's dying, Rob is hacking Death apart into pieces. And when it's all said and done, you find out that he was tricked by these witches. The psychic is actually part of, I guess, a coven of witches that were trying to get rid of Death for all these thousands and thousands of years, and they finally did it. So they keep reading the book, and Rob's basically invisible for the rest of all time. Like, nobody can see him. And he decides that instead of letting the witches get Death, he buries Death's body parts all over the world and kind of leaves a map in the book. And when they're done reading the book, they decide, okay, Miguel, you're going to take Ari to the surface with you and collect more intel on this or something. And then they take... I forgot to mention this. Miguel takes the doctor's arm. And Dr. Mann scans it. It's like, oh no. You done goofed. This doctor, her name is Eleanor Nix. And Dr. Mann used to work for her. Or with her. I can't remember if it's with her or for her. But Dr. Mann knows her. She's super dangerous. Now the thing about Dr. Mann is he is a head on a little spider-like body. Little spider-like robotic body. And the reason for this is working with Dr. Nix, he asked too many questions. And he wanted to find out were all the babies that were born out of the lottery, what they did. And what they're doing with them is he finds one and goes to Dr. Nix. And Dr. Nix makes him throw the baby into like this grinder furnace thing. It's super disturbing. Super disturbing. And Dr. Nix basically tells him, yeah, you're not anywhere near done with this yet. She is just a freaking bad lady. Freaking bad. Totally happy that Miguel cuts her arm off and knocks her out. But there comes a point where Dr. Mann's like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. So he becomes a drunk and finally decides he just doesn't want to live anymore. He goes underground, goes into a group of the Eaters, and just is like, whatever, just kill me. Well, the Eaters take everything, like they just rip him limb from limb. Take everything, of course, but his head. But since nobody can die, his head's still alive. So he sees a shadow creeping up on him, and he's like, cool, this is it. This is going to be the one that just, eats my head and my brain and everything. But it ends up being Father. Father takes him back, and this kind of gives him a will to live, even though he's just a head, is finding a cure for everybody to die. So they're getting ready to take Ari to the surface, and Kimberly gives her this makeover, and she's got this beautiful dress on. Miguel takes her up there, and it's basically, they chipped her. And basically Miguel's like, the last time I was up here, I kind of drew too much attention to myself, so we're going to need you to use your chip to get into these places. Basically, the final shot is they get caught by Dr. Nix. And by caught, I mean she shows up, but that's kind of where the issue ends off on. That's the third and final issue. Like I said, really good story. Very original to me. I haven't read many stories like this where it's nobody on the planet can die. There's probably a couple out there. I personally have never read them. So when I read this, super awesome. Again, with this one, I didn't find too many cons. Like I said, the artwork is definitely a pro. The story is pro. I guess if anything, maybe since they were written so far apart, or maybe not so far apart, but kind of far apart. There's sometimes that the ending and the beginning of the next issue weren't always the most consistent. I mean, they were pretty close. It's not enough to pull you out of the story, but some people might notice that. So as far as cons go, maybe a little inconsistent, but overall it was a great book. Folks at Finish Line, I hope you guys can continue this story for a while. This is another one of those that Edward and team, as soon as you guys have that trade ready, even though I have 3 issues of it, I'm most definitely going to back this. And can't wait for things that you do in the future. But that's going to do it all for this review. Hopefully it wasn't too all over the place for you. And, you know, if you get a chance, if somehow your local comic shop ends up getting copies of these, some comic shops have the random Kickstarter, you know, indie section, pick them up. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. The story's great. The art is amazing. I was a really big fan of the art. So just give it a chance and let me know if you liked it. But that's going to do it all for this review today. As always, you stay safe, you stay healthy, and we'll catch you next time. Later, tots.